A little addendum, right? Going to the this great recommended, highly available, uh, s- photo filled, and like I keep saying, the whole idea of this is the way they did it, where they take the photo of the armored vehicle, usually an existing armored vehicle. Sometimes for some they'll have a photo from the time period, but these are ones that are still around, and they will have it isolated in this. It just kind of is a cool kind of it's in between almost like a drawing and a photo by isolating it. Of course, the German tank destroyers, the idea of, hey, we have a chassis of a vehicle, but we're having problems with these Russian tanks. Let's put a big gun on them. Okay, and it's cheaper to produce because our production capacity is not as great as these other countries. And so you have like the whole bunch of these martyrs. Okay, remember you had Panzermen, the tank men, but you also had, right, the Panzerjägers, the tank hunters, right, who had a real problem in the Soviet Union, but also with the French. Also, you have your assault guns, okay, helping the infantry. These are artillerymen, right? The Stug, right, the Sturmgeschütz. They made it an ideal tank destroyer, but originally it was an assault gun to support the infantry. Right? And of course, the Marder, you took the German Pack 40 that was coming out, and also you took. I like this. Okay, here's an example of German ingenuity. You're having problems with these friggin' tanks, these T-34s and KV-1s. You have a whole bunch of captured ordnance from the Soviets. You have light tank chassis, the Panzer II, which is really, you shouldn't really have this thing anymore. It was a kind of like a training tank. You also have the chassis of the very good 38T, which is now, being outclassed as a tank. Let's put the big guns on these chassis. We already have the production to make them, and now we have mobile anti-tank, highly anti-tank capable firepower. You can see it for the Germans, right? And of course, these crazy ones, the Brumbar, right? As the Stugs were increasingly used as tank destroyers, all right, the original purpose was to support the infantry, right? That was Heinz Guderian came up with that. So now we get, the Nashorn, or the Hornets, the Hornet. This was a killer, man. And so was this, the Ferdinand, right? In fact, they were all killers. The Jagdpanzer too. Look at this monster. Oh, wearable, that's right. Of course, the infamous, still using that 38T chassis with these Pack 39, the Hetzer, right? It was not popular as cruise, it was cramped, but man, you could make these pretty easy, and every one of these things would take out any tank you had in front of you. So now the Allied tank destroyers, I always like the M10. The M10 is kind of cool because it's sort of like they need if you read about the early American tank destroyer units in Tunisia, they got the asses kicked. They didn't know the weapons they had were totally not, they had half tracks with like 75 millimeter cannons on it. They were totally not in this. This was a successful design. It's basically an M4 with no armor and a submarine gun, a 3-inch gun. But of course, I'm a fan of the Soviet. Oh yeah, the ISU 152 motherfucker. Look at this monster. So and of course the SU 100 is also awesome and used by used for many years, decades later. Right, like the Soviet stuff. I mean, even you could say the utility, the ugliness of them is their attraction to me. Okay, and the fact that they were right. They were basically simple designs, but armored and fire and with guns. That's what you needed. Anyway, this is an addendum vid. I'm not gonna go over every goddamn thing in here. Take forever. These ugly. Okay, so now these ugly things, right? The British tortoise, right? Look at this thing, and the American, the T-20, the cool T-28 that actually has a detachable set of tracks that come out of the middle. It looks like something from like Thunderbirds or like a Japanese 70s cartoon. These ugly ass things, the whole idea was like they thought they were going to be attacking major fortifications, which never happened really. But yeah, these were kind of cool. Like, oh yeah, mate, we're freeing you. Yeah, you got one commie giving you the fist. The rest are kind of like, Armored cars, of course, could go over forever. But like I said, I recommend this book. Oh, the Cold War, which is which is to say the unesthetic war. Well, this is funny too. I know, like this is what I'm saying. Like little things like this. You look at the Vietnamese poster celebrates the victory of Vietnam, right? Now it's funny. When you see this soldier here, I assume that's a Vietnamese soldier. What does he have there? That's a lunge mine. That's a Japanese suicide lunge mine used against tanks. I wonder why they had that. Did they use those? I don't know. Now, obviously, as you can see, the Russians, who I liked their designs before, now they get all these ugly, boring, squat designs. You know, they look very, very boring. Oh, God, look at this. Ah. Yeah, and the thing is that with the Russians, oh, this was cool. Like the Berlin, right? You had the little Mexican showdown here. And this, they had someone check, one of the East Germans was like, I'm going to check your papers to an American in West Berlin. What? So you get a general, right? He had tanks come to the border. And what do you think Khrushchev, who was in charge of that, what do you think Khrushchev's going to do? That dude was no joke. That's right. It's funny too. Of course, this went nowhere. And what's sick about my Yakiite ass is that when I see this, okay, now I hate Bolshevism, but this is already what, the 50s? Things are a little different now. What side do you think I'm rooting for if this popped off? Who do you think I would want to get the better of this? You don't want to know that answer, so I think you know already. So, hey, you know what? The Germans and the Soviets were always going to fight. There always was going to be a fight between them. It was inevitable. The side that didn't have to, which turned out to be the greater evil, I'm a little biased against them. But I will say that they made a great tank, the Centurion. They came up with a great tank at the end. Remember, this was the tank that was made to fight the heavy German panzers. I never got to it. So this is the NATO alliance. Ugh, look at these ugly-ass tanks. If Patton was alive, he would kick your ass naming him naming me after a tank like this. What? Look at this ugly piece of shit. So now I'm just, like I said, just to there's a point I want to make, but even in the end, they go over some cool stuff: the protection, the different kind of rounds, the heat rounds. The gas blows through the damn thing like a drill. The chassis, right? The interesting chassis, of course. The leaf spring, the VSSS, right? The Christie one, each one had its own suspension, hence the speed and maneuverability. But one thing I'm going to say, of course, everyone loved the Abrams, right? The M1 Abrams. Oh, that's the tank. Look how, it looked better than a lot of the tanks in the Cold War, which is interesting, right? Because when this thing was being built, it was still the disco era, technically, in America, right? Disco was still on the charts. But in terms of all these ugly-ass tanks, then you look at, what are these German tanks? The Germans are allowed to make tanks again. The Leopard, right? 1965. You look at this thing. That's interesting. Okay, now you look at the Leopard made in the 70s. Look at this thing. Look how it looks. Look at the chassis. They all have 7 wheels, right? The Germans' designs, the hated Germans, the ones who are finally allowed to make tanks again, poor little Shotzies, right? They're finally allowed to make tanks again by their masters, their occupiers. And then you notice the famous M1 Abrams. It looks looks like a Leopard, doesn't it? Once again, ironically, the German engineering and design is being ripped off in the Leopard 1. So although even the Leopard 1 didn't do too well recently, but I mean, hey, yeah, like the M4. The M4 design survived for a while. All right. Real quick, these things, man. Talk about in Vietnam era. They made these things to be cheap-ass armored vehicles, right? It's disposable, cheap. I mean, the crew member, like, the guy couldn't even, like, the driver was in the tank. When you were ready to fight, you had to be outside of it. Like, you weren't even protected. So, like, in this one. But it's interesting, this rather crappy design actually was very valuable, right, in weight, right, in the city during the Tet Offensive. The Marines used it. It's funny how the Marines could always take the crappiest weapons and get something really good out of it. Anyway, enough. I went too long again, but I had to. I recommend this book. Later on, they get into the very, the more, the Russians are sucky. Look at those helmets. I wear that, I would feel depressed. You start to see all kinds of things, but the armored vehicles, they're just not as interesting. And like I said, unless they make Minovsky particles or the equivalent, it's sort of the end for at least the tank. Of course, the South Africans, right? They pioneered the mine-resistant weapons, right? But anyway, no, if I could go on forever, but I gotta stop. Was that they have that crazy stealth tank in here somewhere, but they might need that against the drone. Once again, a small, easy to make, highly producible weapon, okay, has been the death knell of the tank, right? Once again, who invented that? That's right. I don't even have to bring it up. But, who knows what will be next, right? Unfortunately, conflict is never going to end, apparently, amongst this race of beings that we are all a member of. But, good, awesome book, man. Really, lots of pictures, lots of info, no real bias, no real glaring mistakes, I guess I could say. And of course, it's the Smithsonian, so it's gonna have high levels of research. I mean, at least with this stuff. So, all right. Peace, man. And I mean that. I know. Oh, you cucking out.